Hello, scrufftards, random strangers online, and the usual vatniks that like to watch my videos. Welcome to the War Zone. I'm Scruffy, and this is Scruffy Tales. And we're gonna take a look at the front lines down in Ukraine, as always, and just to upset the vatniks, explore a bit how Ukraine, at certain locations, is actually bleeding Russia dry. Uh, Potentially. There's always a chance that Russia is actually outright kicking Ukraine's ass. But I mean, there's a good argument, I think, that Ukraine is actually uh, following a game plan that is working and that is slowly bleeding Russia dry. So let's head on over to the maps.
Right, so Kursk incursion. Not many updates, none at all that I've seen on the maps. Situation appears to remain the same here at Veseloye along the border. We have Russia pushing in here 500 meters north of the breach point where Ukraine pushed into Russia in this area, but so far it seems as if Russia has not managed to push in to secure this small area here. Yeah, that's about it in that area. Elsewhere, Russia made this push towards Pokrovsk, trying to reach this vital bridge. No further updates. Seems as if Ukraine is holding the line. Don't know. Not much has happened here in Novoye against Linishliek either, or no updates on this push made by Ukraine into this area either. What seems to be happening is that Russia is trying to push in from Ubukovka into these squares here to threaten Darino. There's a lot of artillery strikes, airstrikes against Ukrainian positions in Darino and Nikolaevo Darino. So I guess Russia is trying to disrupt Ukrainian reinforcements moving into these squares here, as Russia is also at the same time launching assaults across this field here. But it appears as if Ukraine is holding these windbreaks and Russia is having trouble getting across the fields. And that's about it. It's not, like I said, not much has happened at all in territory shifting hands and switching hands and what have you. So moving down here to Kharkiv front, the Kharkiv front and all of Ukraine's push into Belgorod. Interestingly, it appears as if Ukraine may have pushed into Suravlevka, coming in this way and grabbing these patches of woods and bushes down here. Pushed in this way along this street here into these buildings, and also made it quite a ways up this way into town, and that effectively cuts the main road, so Russia cannot utilize it to bring in logistics, so they have to follow the other paths here in the town. But if we zoom in, I mean, these aren't roads, they are dirt tracks, right? So imagine driving several dozens of heavy loaded trucks through here on a daily basis, while the enemy is 500, 600 meters away, if that. So no, this is not a good situation for the Russians. They really need to unlock the highway here so that they can bring in the logistics to the Kharkiv front. So at the moment, it appears as if Ukraine is successfully disrupting the logistical flow into this section of the Kharkiv front line. And I think it's showing. We know of this big push here Ukraine has also managed to dislodge the Russians from these windbreaks here, which has allowed Ukraine to push up this way as well. So they are now threatening Hlyuboke from this way, as well as pushing up along the dam here, along the Kharkiv River, here at the Travyansky Reservoir. And this is interesting. We'll see if they can manage to push on. It's not an easy approach as we zoom in. It's a narrow path with cover and not a lot of it either. So I mean, set up a couple of good machine guns and have mortar support and drone support. It should be, I know, the Russians, they know where Ukraine is coming from. They're coming through here. So with a couple of good machine gun nests, drone support and mortars, it's a tough fight for Ukraine pushing north. But if they manage to push along the reservoir here, I mean, at the end of it, they are right at that vital supply line, so that they may even threaten it at this point here, right on the border, as well as over here. So, I mean, it's looking, at the moment, it's looking as it might be a rough ride for Russia in this area, with Ukraine disrupting the logistics and having, you know, an uptick in successes along the front line here south of Hlyuboke, primarily here, pushing up here on top of the hill. This is a big hill. This is the eastern slope. These are the western slopes, and Ukraine is now pushing up on top of the hill itself. And as we've seen, they're pushing along the slopes and ridge lines here all over this hill. So we'll see if Russia can hold on to the forest here and the town of Hlyuboke. So yeah, what else? Well, I guess what's the most interesting part is that we learned yesterday from Kursk himself that during the 2 to 3 months that Ukraine has been operating here in Kursk, Russia has suffered some 21,000 casualties, and out of those 21,000, 12,000 are wounded for the Russians, and some 700 have been taken as POWs. But this is the really incredible part. Russia suffered some 8,000 killed in action, right? 12,000 wounded, 8,000 killed. That is an insane number. Usually it's like, 10% of the wounded are killed. So if you have 12,000 wounded, you have roughly 1,000 killed. But in this instance, it's nearly 50-50, not far from it, right? Basically, a third of Russian losses in Kursk have been killed. And the others are, the remaining 2/3 are wounded or prisoners of war. That is incredible. And it's also a measure of how successful this operation has been. And it explains why Russia has been forced to bring in the North Koreans to fight in this area. Because if Russia has to bring in all the manpower they need, considering how deadly this battlefield is, they would have to empty, say, the Kharkiv front line or the Kupiansk, or not empty it, but take 5 to 10,000 from maybe Kharkiv and Kupiansk and elsewhere, and that would well and truly weaken those front lines, giving Ukraine an edge along several sections of the front line, just so that Russia can maintain and contain the Ukrainians here in Kursk. And these casualties figures, they will just continue to rise over the coming months, because as we see here, we have a river here with lakes and what have you, that Ukraine, I guess if they can't hold on, they will eventually fall back to the east of this river. And at that point, it's going to be difficult for Russia to follow. You also have this choke point here right between these larger lakes. You have waterways. It's going to be difficult for Russia to come down this way as well. And coming in from the north, again, you can see here choke point in between everything with the high ground. It's going to be a difficult approach for Russia to push Ukraine out of Kursk. It's not going to happen in 2024. And if Russia eventually manages to reclaim all of this, I mean, take a look at the terrain here around the Sudzha itself. Rivers here that form a natural defensive line in the terrain that will allow Ukraine to fortify and hold this territory. And then you have the town of Sudzha with this surrounding settlements as well. It's gonna be a tough fight for Russia to pull this off, especially considering that Ukraine has deployed some very high profile units, such as the 47th and the 21st, and now also the 155th, one of the newer brigades, trained and equipped by France, that Ukraine, my guess is that Ukraine has high hopes for the 155th to perform well in battle. And they are all apparently deployed to this area, and that might also explain why Russia has those high casualty numbers, because they are fighting some of the best units available to the Ukrainian army. And I mean, Russia will suffer. I think we can assume that Russia will suffer another 20,000 casualties in the next 3 months, and it will just keep on going. And by the time they reach this river, question is if Russia won't be forced to allocate large numbers of troops to reach this far. And especially if they want to cross this river, that will be very costly for Russia, especially when they're trying to push in to Sudzha itself. Alright, so we're taking a look at Kursk and the Kharkiv front there briefly. Let's zoom into what's going on here at the Oskil River. Well, as we know, Russia has made this push. No surprises, they're coming down this way. Ever so slightly, the goal is to grab territory east of the Oskil River. And they've also begun the operations here. This is just north of a road leading from Svatove to Borova. Russia's tried to push out this way before. Back then they failed. But now, as you can see, they are making ground up here. Probably trying to push out this way again so that they can grab this territory once they've secured up here. They can also push down along the Oskil as they're coming in from Svatove. And I suppose with the gains they have made down here, the plan is to continue towards the Oskil and push down south and again grab the territory here. So they're going to cut out territory here east of the Oskil piecemeal, first up here, then here, then here, and then they will eventually try and grab Lyman. And I don't think they will try and push across the Oskil. It's a difficult obstacle to try and get across. If you watch my videos, I've talked about this before. So this will probably be the defensive barrier between Ukrainian and Russian forces eventually sometime during 2025 would be my guess. I think Russia is on that much of a role in this area that they might actually grab all of this. But who knows, Ukraine might put a stop to it as well. Maybe they'll only grab half of it or whatever. But it feels like they will eventually reach the Oskil River sometime during 2025. And if they do make it to the river, then they are in a decent position to set up artillery and what have you to attack Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, possibly even. Pushing out this far also pushes back Ukrainian air defenses, obviously. So Russian aircraft might actually be operating here more freely, launching bombs towards Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, or Siversk for that matter, to help the Russians push in this way and grab this territory. So that's basically what's going on there. Moving down to Pokrovsk. What is Russia up to? Well, we've talked about this several times before, but why not do it again? Son of a bitch. Here we go. Where do we have something Russian? We have something Russian here. And standard 152 millimeter round. If you want to attack Pokrovsk with artillery, this is the outskirts of Pokrovsk. As you can see, you can't move in a straight line from Avdiivka and Ocheretina, because then you can only field this much artillery. You need to grab as much territory as possible, preferably up here, all the way down here and along this way as well, to fit all the artillery you need to bombard Pokrovsk and Myrnorad. So that's what Russia is doing. They are also trying to push out towards Kursk, and some might wonder why if you want to take Pokrovsk. Well, if we zoom in, you can see here you have this supply line leading in to Pokrovsk from the south. Ukraine is currently relying on it together with all the other supply lines, but Russia wants this supply line so they can use it themselves, because you move down here to Constantinople and Andriivka, west of Kursk. If they continue from Kursk to Constantinople, Andriivka, and then follow north along this road, you end up at Novotroitsk and Shevchenko, and then you can begin assaulting Pokrovsk from the south. So what do we need this? No, get rid of that one. What Russia wants to do is, well, they pushed out along this highway here and secured what's the name, Seledove here, and they obviously pushed out this way and to Rodivka. There's a road leading from this highway to Rodivka, and now they're pushing towards Kursk so that they can push out here, and from here head north towards Shevchenko. So these are the three logistical routes Russia wants in order to support the eventual assault on Myrnorad and Pokrovsk. So they can't just move up this way to Rodivka and then launch an assault, because then there's no room for the artillery, there's no room for logistics to move in and out. It's going to be easy for Ukraine to target those trucks, to target troop movement and what have you. So you need to expand and get space to fit all the artillery to be able to move in logistics safely, and to set up command posts and forward bases of operations where you can rest troops as they rotate out and then rotate back into the combat line and what have you. So that's what's going on down here. So this is going to take a couple of more months. Russia's going to lose thousands of troops. And now here's the thing. Depending on, I guess, if you're pro-Ukrainian or pro-Russian or whatever, there's two ways to look at it, I think. One is that Ukraine is doing this Russian style and trying to hold each line in turn for as long as possible, throwing in manpower to hold every line, and then they get steamrolled by Russia and have to fall back time and time again. If that is the case, Ukraine is losing this particular battle really badly. It's if that is the game plan, they are getting their asses kicked. But there is another version to look at, or a different point of view, and that is that Ukraine might actually be trying to wage this battle in a more modern style of combat, where you don't try and hold each line until every soldier is dead, that you actually conduct hit and run attacks, or a hit and run defense, I should say. So as the enemy is moving in, you hit him a couple times and then you fall back. He follows you because he gains territory, but then you hit him again and you fall back. And he follows you as you're falling back, and you keep shooting at him. He's going to be shooting at you as well, obviously, because you need to hold each position for a couple of days if possible, and until he reaches a point where you are in danger of being wiped out, and that is when you fall back. And it's called defense at depth, and it's basically a fighting, not retreat, but withdrawal, a fighting withdrawal. And you do it purposefully and with the intention of giving up terrain in order to inflict as much casualties as possible, while saving your own troops and your own supplies to prolong the fighting. Because if you hold a line to the bitter end, you will lose all of your manpower and all of your resources holding that line. So instead, you fall back ever so slightly and inflict as much damage as possible on the enemy before you give up the defensive position and fall back. And it's kinda like maneuver warfare, but in reverse. Instead of gaining territory by being mobile and adapting to the situation, you give up ground by being mobile and adapting to the situation. So you do it on purpose. So I think that might be what's going on. I think Ukraine, they have a line they cannot fall back from, and that line is roughly here along the river here, and maybe along this river, and obviously here at Myrnorad and Pokrovsk. So the terrain down here from Vuhledar, south of the image here, but from Vuhledar and up to this river and over here, that is terrain Ukraine feels they can give the Russians as they're falling back, utilizing defense at depth, right? Inflicting as much casualties as possible before you reach this point where Russia is then ready to assault Pokrovsk. And in so doing, weakening Russia to such an extent that when they do reach this line, they don't have the manpower or firepower left to launch a successful attack beyond this point. So that is, I think this is actually what the Ukrainians are trying to do. I'm not saying they are successful, but I think this might be what they're trying to do. Fighting withdrawal, a defense at depth. You hold a position for as long as possible, but just before it becomes undefendable, they leave and allow the Russians to move in. And in that time, up to that point, they have inflicted as many casualties as possible on the Russians, and then the Ukrainians withdraw, and they will keep doing that in this entire area here until they reach a point up here where they must hold the line. And hopefully, when we reach this point, Russia has lost steam and cannot continue with the assault towards Pokrovsk and Myrnorad. And I think it's a fair enough argument to claim that Ukraine might actually be conducting maneuver warfare in reverse. They are actually doing fighting withdrawals. They are doing defense at depth. They are holding the line for as long as possible and then fall back and do hit and run tactics, essentially on a grander scale, to draw the Russians in, kill as many of them as possible, fall back, and by the time you reach a point where you must hold the line, Russia hopefully has lost steam to move on,
and then you can hold that definitive defensive line. And Russia can't do anything about it. The Vatniks, they're gonna go crazy about this. Oh my God! Take a look in the comment section. I kid you not, they're gonna be down there and they're gonna be complaining, and it's gonna be a whole lot of fun reading their comments. So that's my plan, at least, to do that. But that's gonna have to be it. I hope you found it interesting. I hope I'll see you in the next one. As always, go på marsch, Ukraine, and give them hell.